Today in Goss's Garage, we're going to talk about a part that has been on the automobile, well, just about since the beginning of automobiles, and that is the water pump. Now, over the years, water pumps in some respects haven't changed all that much. See, you have impellers, such as we see on this one, and those impellers spin and they move the coolant through the engine to keep the engine cool. Now, if these stop spinning or the coolant goes low or something like that, you're going to wind up with a situation such as we see back here with this overheated engine. All right, you don't want that. But there's a new wrinkle to all of this. You see, these water pumps have changed. Some of them are hidden. There's all kinds of different things. But modern cars with modern computers in them now are smart enough to know if the engine is starting to overheat or is actually overheated or something like that. So if you don't see the temperature gauge go up, you may see a check engine light. Now, if you get a check engine light, it's a yellow light, you have to check to make sure, look down at the temperature gauge, do whatever you need to do to make sure the car isn't overheated, because the computer may put the car into a special mode to shut down cylinders and different things like that to protect it from being destroyed, which of course can happen if the engine gets seriously overheated. All right, so if the check engine light comes on, look at the temperature gauge, make sure the temperature gauge isn't pegged. If it is, shut the engine down right now. The other thing is that if the check engine light comes on, you should pull over and you should check the level of the coolant in the coolant recovery bottle or expansion tank, whatever your car has, and make sure that it is up to the proper level. The reason for that is that if all of the coolant leaves the engine in a big hurry, say a hose ruptures or something like that, and the coolant goes out very rapidly, well, the temperature sensor that controls the gauge, it can't read temperature from the air. It has to have liquid in it. So once that coolant is all gone, and it can go out of the engine really quickly in a matter of 10 seconds or less, then you're not going to get a reading telling you that the engine is overheated, even though it's overheated to the point where it may be damaging the engine. And that's where the check engine light comes in. It recognizes this and it comes on. So when you have that circumstance, pull over, make sure the system is full. All right, now a couple things about water pumps. Used to be that water pumps were simply driven by the engine drive belt, or fan belt as we used to call it. It would go around the water pump and around the crankshaft and turn the water pump. Well, over the years, these things have changed so that in some cases the water pump, like this one over here, is driven by the timing belt. So it's back under a cover on the engine and the timing belt turns the water pump. But here's something else you want to be aware of. Many water pumps, this impeller in here, there are different materials that they can make them out of. This particular one is made out of a cast steel or cast iron. Now over here we have another one that is made out of plastic. So everybody seems to think that the only thing that can go wrong with a water pump is that the pump can leak. Well, not so. With this plastic impeller that we find on a lot of cars these days, these little veins on here can break off, and when they do, there's nothing to circulate the coolant and the engine overheats. Another thing that happens is that this center hub in here, it cracks, and when the engine warms up, well, this thing slips on the shaft that's turning it, and, no coolant circulation, engine overheats. Now, other things that you need to be aware of about water pumps. If we look at this one, it has some pretty serious teeth on it. Those teeth are there because this one is driven by a timing chain. Now, this happens to go on a car where it fits behind the timing chain cover, way back in there, and this can be 10 hours or more to replace. So keep in mind, if you get some ridiculous estimate on putting a water pump on your car, it might be one of these, so check into it and make sure, because these things are just buried back in the engine behind the timing chain. Now over here we have something that is somewhat different. Again, we have a plastic impeller on this one, which could deteriorate over time. And that's another reason to keep the coolant in the car changed on a regular basis, is because the additives that are in the coolant help protect this plastic and so on. But this one is mounted in such a manner that it uses this little teeny belt driven off of what's called a jack shaft that turns, and it turns the belt, and the belt turns the water pump, and so on. Well, in this particular case, over here we have the belt that came off of this water pump. The bearing in it went bad, and the car overheated. Well, it overheated because the water pump seized up and it burnt the belt in two, and now there's no circulation and so on. And the only real warning on this was the check engine light. So again, remember, check engine light can also mean overheating. So, you know, cars are changing and you got to approach them differently. Okay, those are some of my tips about water pumps in general. Here's something else. If you're going to do your own repair work, remember, this water pump is going to come with a gasket. Unless there is some instruction with that gasket that tells you to use a gasket sealant, don't use it. The gasket is there to seal. Putting added sealant and different things like that on a gasket can often make a leak rather than prevent a leak, because it may not be compatible with the gasket. So read and follow label directions, folks. And if you have a question or a comment, how about dropping me a line right here at radio@goss-garage.com.